Well, it's been a little bit since we've done this. Couple weeks off. Been a crazy 8-week road stretch for us with Kart Chaser streaming all these events. Obviously, I'm still in a hotel room, working our way back home. We'll have a couple days back, and then we get back at it for the SCUSA Summer Nats. But there's been a lot that's gone down over the last few weeks, and so I figured, why not go ahead and get back into the rhythm? Let's make sure we get our happy hour stuff going and bring back some familiar faces. So. Braden Eves, chilling after a long road stretch for 2 weeks for you.
Yeah, just last week felt like a couple weeks in and of itself, but thankfully, finally back home and catch up a little bit. A little bit sick at the moment. Probably has something to do with how long I've been away from home, but it is what it is, and happy to be back.
And, well, superstar Chris Wehrheim flies everywhere, so he can complain all he wants about these weekend road stretches, but he's not on the road. Chris, good to have you, buddy.
Good to be back. Yeah, I mean, I think my wife, she likes to remind me that I was only home for 4 days in the last month. And with a 5-year-old son, it's definitely great to be back and spend some time at home, play some tennis, get ready for the next little stretch, get ready for the SCUSA Pro Tour coming up, and get back with my Nash boys and Charlie Smith and get after it.
So let's talk about what we just wrapped up, I guess. Braden, you were obviously racing. Chris, you were obviously helping out. So, Chris, what stuck out to you, I guess, from this past weekend? If we dive into IAME Grands, what do you want to kick things off with here tonight?
Other than the heat and the super long days, yeah, I mean, I grew up in the South just like you, but man, that humidity hits hard, especially after living in California for 10 years, or the last 10 years, I should say. I think especially for the drivers that ran double duty, you could visually see more than ever, I think, just the wear and tear of the whole day. And I'm sure Braden can definitely speak on that. Having to go into the night show, especially, someone of Braden's caliber. So a couple of those guys we saw, like essentially the same kind of group of guys go into the night show each night. Those were long, grueling days, especially with the heat. I think I heard a lot of people kind of mention the difference between last year and this year with the date change and the weather change. So it's kind of interesting how that played out. And obviously the sweetheart story of the weekend and way to cap off the weekend with Dalton. But I would say kind of the weekend as a whole, how long it felt and the heat and everything grueling. That was a long, long week of racing.
Yeah, Braden, what do you got to say on that?
Yeah, it was a lot. I've been running double duty now for, I think that was my third weekend doing double duty. And that one definitely felt like the longest event. I didn't even really, after the end of the first day, I was like, oh, shoot, like we still have 3 more days. Plus, essentially it was not really just double duty because we have the shootouts, which have 2 heats, which are equal distance to our heats during the day. And then the finals were 18 laps. So it was almost like doing triple on both of those days. And then the heat was just something else. I don't even know how much water I drank. That was definitely what felt like, I think, the hottest karting event that I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, it was up there for me, for sure.
But, I thought it just felt like an absolute war. Like we went into it and by the end of the weekend, I didn't even remember what happened the first 2 days. But, is what it is. Overall, kind of not the best weekend for me. Struggled, had some mechanical issues through X30 in the first couple, and I felt like I had a really good shot, but then ultimately in the final just kind of missed a little bit. I think a little bit on chassis and a little bit on engine, and just kind of sat in that like 8th place, kind of waiting for my stuff to hopefully come in, and it never came in. So ended up, I think, finishing 8th in KA and 10th in X30, which isn't too shabby, but would have hoped for more.
I feel like too, Trackhouse is that kind of track where if you're not in that top 3 to 4, 5 drivers, it's probably one of the most difficult tracks to get out of that mid-pack range. There's so many spots where you can just get not really die bombed, but you're not getting passed by one guy, right? You get passed into turn 1 and there's a pack. It's hard for you to slot in if there's a pack, and then you're getting done going up the hill or down into 4. If you get, passed into the hairpin, you're usually getting 2 or 3 guys. Someone's tracking out on you. You're dropping a wheel. Last turn's the same thing. I saw it happened to Paulie. It happened to you a couple times where I saw you had momentum going forward, but then there's just this one guy that didn't want to work with the group and dive bombs you. And then you're like stuck on the outside essentially for 3 corners. And you're like, hopefully I get to the front straightaway. I can roll the outside and kind of slot in, but it's not always going to work out that way. So, I mean, it is probably one of the most, if you don't have that pure pace to go through the field, it's brutal in the mid-pack there. Not even mid-pack. I mean, 5th, 6th on back, depending on how the group works out after lap 1, can be just an upward battle for 20 laps.
Absolutely. And it's like a complete shift from coming from Newcastle the couple weeks before, because Newcastle, I mean, there's so many places to pass, and none of the places that you can pass in Newcastle really cost you a whole lot of time.
Right.
But then GoPro, you have to be like class of the field way quicker than everyone if you're going to actually move anywhere whatsoever. And it really comes down to, I think every time I go there, it just reminds me how much the people that race there a lot have an advantage. Like that's probably my least raced track. Just never seemed that we really went there a whole lot when I was in karting. And then now we go there a whole lot more, but it's a difficult track, and the people that have done a million laps around there definitely have it figured out a little bit more than the rest of us, I think.
Yeah. And especially like this weekend. I mean, Chris, your points, like, Braden and I were even talking coming in about how, stacked the field was. I don't, normal national race field, you have, anywhere from 5 to 10, maybe 8 to 15, legitimate top level guys. Then you have kind of a midfield, and then you have, a few stragglers where you can tell it's probably one of their first big races ever. And this weekend, the KA field, it didn't feel like it had that. It felt like there were a lot more guys up to the limit. And I felt like we just extended that front pack where, I mean, even the first heat race, like, Weston Workman was one that stuck out to me. I was watching that one on the fence line. We were working on some stuff, and I mean, the kid started top 4, and by halfway through the race, by just being a little bit overstuck, he was 18th and wasn't able to go any more forward. And he admitted after he kind of made one mistake where he kind of got shafted in turn 8, but I mean, the only guys behind him were the normal guys that probably would slot in, in the mid 20s or 30s at a PKS or a Pro Tour. And then here this weekend, they were in the 40s of the 50 something. So that just makes it so hard. And it's just so tough in any class once you have that many drivers at the limit. I mean, it feels like the conversations have kind of died out a little bit, I think, from maybe, it feels like when the X30 came out and it had been around only on year 2, year 3, like 2015, 2016, I remember a lot of the time in the pits here in conversations like, man, we need to go faster for a pro class because we need to spread the field out. There's too many guys even on the limit at that. And then now we've dropped that horsepower down. We've tightened the lap times up even more in K, and we took damn near everybody, even if there wasn't everyone in the front from X30 crossing over, there was an equal guy in KA only that weekend. We didn't have Norberg run both. Yeah. We had Formel. We didn't have, Ataconis run both. We had AJ Myers, run in. And then the rest of them was double duty guys. So, I don't think I've seen a that big of a top heavy KA class ever. And while sure it's, you see comments where like it's the most exciting racing and the most fun racing. And it is fun to watch. But it's almost like I don't want to call it Mickey Mouse because it's not, but it is a little bit, because what are you going to do? You can't out chess match the guy. There's a little bit of playing the people and trying to be in the right spot at the right time. But, in the case when Braden got knocked out of the way, or even like, Paulie, especially in that pre-final he was in on Sunday. I mean, I don't think he did anything wrong. He was just wrong place, wrong time. where the wreck went out, and that could have been anywhere. It wasn't like a normal, you put yourself in a bad spot and got hit. And he goes from 3rd or 4th to 9th or 10th, I think, when he crossed the line. And instead of starting in the top 10, he started back in like 16th. Yeah. And in that field, you're just not going forward because there's too many guys up front that are just going to run the same exact lap time. So it made it super difficult.
Too, you know, I forgot who I was talking to about, it might have been Austin Miles. We were watching the KA race, and, you know, I think kind of the commentary over the last couple of years of KA has been, obviously it's a little bit less experienced drivers and the racing's kind of chaotic, erratic. The racecraft's not there. There's a couple of guys that think they have great racecraft. In reality, they have horrible racecraft, and, you know, they mess up the racing for a lot of people because they're overly aggressive and don't really think about the long-term race, where you see that a little bit more in X30. And even on the higher international level, you really start to see that, where people really see the big picture of how the race is going to play out for themselves, or how it can. And you saw it this weekend, how much better the racing was in K than normal. Okay, still have a few stragglers, a few guys that are overly aggressive, but I think all in all, you saw way less dive bombing, way less like overly aggressive defending. You saw guys, I mean, you see, I wanted to joke with him about Danny with all his hand signals during the weekend. You know, I think it was to Braden one time, he gave like 3 during a lap, and he's like pointing to the corner that he's going to go for the pass for the lead. He's like, hold on, I'm going to go there. Yeah. But it was just cool to see that. And it shows that, you know, it is really up to the level of drivers. It's not really the categories that dictate this. It is really the level of drivers that's racing it, that's, you know, giving the racing that we want. It's not the closer racing with the, you know, with the KA or more guys within the, I mean, the top level X30, this was probably the least stacked X30 field we've had all year, to be honest, right? There were a couple really big names missing. And, you know, you kind of saw it was a little bit more spread out than it had been in the top 5. Right. Yeah. I think that mid pack was kind of the same, but there were 2 or 3 guys that kind of really dominated the weekend over the course of the whole weekend, except for, you know, Dalton coming in at the end and kind of surprising everyone. But it really does show that the drivers are really what's important here.
Yeah, I can attest. I know we got off a little bit too on the length of the weekend, the heat of the weekend. It's funny how, you know, we have a bit of a short-term memory as racers, right? Because that's, I mean, what you guys are saying, and I feel it too. I mean, you know, the heat beat us down, the rain tried to torch our equipment so many times. The same with everyone in the paddock. But on the same note, we came out of that event in the second year in 2022. And I think a lot of people, you know, at that time, it was like it didn't have that first year special vibe, you know, and then coming into the event this year, that was kind of what I felt like from some, not everyone. There was still a lot of people that had only done it once, and 2022 was their first year. So they're like, that was kick ass. I'm so excited for something a little different. The shootouts are cool. Now there's Fast 5 for everybody. So every class is going to get a little bit of this rack 'em up run type racing that we don't normally get to do. And night racing is always fun, and that's pretty rare. But out of 2022, it was like, we went too late in the year because it was so cold at night. The crowds that we had at the end of July when it ran in the first time weren't around. And that was what was so impressive in that very first rendition. That was, you know, a little bit of lightning in a bottle with our first ever broadcast going well. That should have gone way worse and actually went pretty good. And the first time anything had been streamed in a few years, US wise, outside of Supernats. The shootouts were new, and it was hot, but it wasn't as bad, and there was no rain. And so then we went to October last year, and the shootouts didn't have as much hype behind them. It didn't help that it was at the end of the RPG dominant era in X30. So Ryan walked the dog in both. But, you know, then it's like, okay, well, let's go back to the summer when more kids can run during the week, so that it's not as bad of a deal with the night racing, and hopefully be nice enough at night that people will hang around and for 3 or 4 hours when they're done, watch the races. And, you know, now it was like, I think everyone's echoing the same as both of you guys. And I put myself in that same boat that, damn, that was a hard feeling, like forever, never ending type race weekend. So maybe, you know, September,
that's what I was
works
thinking.
better next year.
September is actually pretty dead for us this year. And it has been, to be honest, for some time, especially with the USPTS moving their last race to the first week of October. I actually talked to a couple of guys at the end of the weekend I was going out that they're like, man, with Pro Tour right after this, like it's a hustle to get my like number one engine rebuilt and ready to go to the next national. And, my engine builder stacked up because I got, not everyone ran their number one stuff here, or, it's just a long list, or you were a little bit late to the party. I also think, I think maybe we talked about it, Xander, on the fence one of the races. I think for what the weekend can be, I think it's a little bit too long and drawn out. I think it does not need to be Thursday to Sunday, leaving at 6, on Sunday. If we're going to do 3 heat races, do we really need a pre-final? Do we really need I don't really think it's a big draw for people doing the 5 go-kart masters, K junior, X30 junior shootouts. I don't think that's really hyping anyone up, to be honest, for an extra $500. All those things are cool in theory, but I think over, the weekend itself, when you kind of leave it, you're like, man, do I really want to come back to this again? In all honesty, you're going to come back because it's still one of the raddest events we have, but there is so much room to really improve it. I think it does need to be condensed and really be like a Friday, Saturday, half a Sunday kind of thing. And that would really help.
Yeah. I mean, the Fast 5 shootouts, right? That I could see coming a mile away, because after the first year, the K shootout was great. The X30 shootout was money. I mean, on the
amazing.
money from a race, right? That 2021 shootout, Braden, that I know it probably hurts a little bit that you almost won. But to be a part of that was so cool. And so then everyone wants to get to drive in it. And so then last year, right, Eric did for micro and mini, it was like they were the NFL teams in the NFL draft. So if the top 12 or however many how many drivers are going to be in the event, however many were the kids ranked after the heat races that day, they got to pick in order the guy they thought would win. And then if that guy won, then they got $500 that way. And I thought that was a pretty cool way. And it's something that maybe could have been included for, do 2 at a time, do a junior and a mini or micro on one day, and a micro or mini and a junior or a master on the other day, to have everyone at least have some investment in those races. But it definitely drew things out. I'm curious, and maybe the viewers could let us know, over the course as this airs. I was a little late on getting the live up, so I know we won't have as many live chatter tonight of the parents that were involved on the micro, the mini, junior races, what they thought of being a part of it. And, everyone wants to dance with the prettiest girl at the ball, right? And the cool part of that was getting to be in the shootouts. So, while you listen to them and you try to appease them at a certain point, sometimes you have to almost give them what they want. And then it's like, maybe we don't need to do that, moving forward. But it was definitely didn't help on the long days for any team or family or anyone, because that was an extra hour to hour 15 that, if we don't have those Saturday night, Joe Turney might not have $5,000 in his pocket from that rain shower that hit once they ended and we got out for the X30 shootout. So maybe he should be thanking them and begging Eric that it stays again next year. But that's a good point too. Yeah, we get the same thing.
I was talking to a lot of the team owners too, and the 12, 10 o'clock start. I mean, we're all racers. We're built to wake up early. I mean, I can't remember the last time I was actually really able to sleep in unless I'm jet lagged. And it's like you're just twiddling your thumbs. You don't want to go. There's no need to go to the track. Who knows how much computer work you have? But I'd rather either commit to. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but they do have kind of like a hard out on how long they can race till at night, right?
Yes and no. They technically do. I think they normally get exemptions with an hour or 2 window.
Okay.
For this event, like they have a couple races a year they're allowed to go late.
I would say push more to doing like night racing if we're going to do that, right? Like we're going to start late. Let's start even later and like go a little bit deeper into the night, have more night racing for everyone involved, or start at the normal time, get stuff done, have like a dinner break, but like a proper dinner break where like if people want to go, go back, go get some dinner, a local spot, and then come back for the night show. They can kind of come back for the night show, which you do see kind of in the like oval stock car world. They'll do some special events at night And it's like they do some racing during the day, they get that done, and then there's a night show afterwards. That's kind of like a secondary event, but that might just separate the day a little bit better for everyone, so you don't feel like you're there all day kind of twiddling your thumbs at some points.
Yeah. I mean, especially it gets easier too if we go later in the year, right? This is a great point by a couple people commenting in that, I mean, it's not getting dark there till 9,
Right.
Unlike last year, where last year the heat races, the last round of heats before the night shows and the last 2 rounds of practice were actually under the lights. This year we were just, we could have been on a bad SCUSA or USPKS day and been running and it would have felt the same. I mean, with the format that's at USPKS right now with 3 heats and a warm-up with split groups for K Senior and K Junior at every one of their races, those Saturdays are 8 a.m. to about 7 p.m. I think Newcastle and Orlando were both really, really long. So it could be something to be said to run a little bit later. But that goes back on, what people want out of these weekends. I mean, you were talking to me about it a little bit on the fence line. All you got to do on this weekend was go to a nice little coffee house. You didn't get to go to a nice dinner. So
I snuck away to Epic one night. So,
but I like this idea from Trevor Marsha here. And this was to say to run on Labor Day weekend, because then if you do that,
not bad.
The Sunday deal, we're not having to, that was the other worry about the X30 shootout on Saturday, was that we were going to run so late Saturday. If we tried to run that full 4-session warm up, pill pick heats main, then turn around and come to the track at 8 in the morning on Sunday, leaving it probably at 2, it was going to burn all those guys out. And it would only end up being about 20 minutes later doing it. But if we have a holiday weekend where we could run late on Sunday, then the night racing stuff, works. And at this point, that weekend, I think all the promoters have tried to respect Rock Island for a long, long time, but I don't think a lot of people have high hopes that race is going to survive the insurance debacle for 24. So then that weekend opens up,
Yeah, and I think it's lost its steam, like from the mainstream karting group. We used to see a lot more of like guys that raced, back then, Man Cup, Constructors Cup, IKF Region 7, kind of come out and do that kind of 1 or 2 street races a year. And it just seems like there's not many people that really do. It's that kind of core group that just do it. So you're not really stepping on any toes anymore.
Yeah. What do you think of, the original plan on the practice day, Braden, where we were going to run 6 rounds, 3 on each layout? Like, if you have that alternate layout, how many sessions do you realistically feel like you need before you go to heat racing? Because I heard a couple people saying they would have been better with 2 and 2, 4 sessions on the whole day, 2 on one layout, 2 on the other, do 9 minutes instead of 7, and shorten the day by about 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was part of the reason why I feel like the weekend felt just so long and grueling, was with the layouts they had. I just don't know how much some of those layouts really added to the racing, to be honest. I mean, I think it takes away a little bit as well because they're running those layouts during the year with their club guys.
Right.
And I don't like that that's happening. I mean, I like the concept, especially when they first started, like having people, new track who can learn it the quickest, send them out and go. And I thought, the one time that I think it was great this weekend was when we did that X30 shootout when we ran backwards. That layout was cool. And it was going to be extreme. It was extremely challenging, added with the fact that we couldn't see anywhere where we were going. And we had no idea what the layout was. I mean, realistically, like some of those corners felt like I was just going in completely blind, especially in the first session. I ended up having to change out my helmet because my visor was not doing the job in the first one. But I don't know. For me, the 6 practices on the first day when I was supposed to do 12, especially for double duty, that felt like way too much. I think too much practice, in my opinion. I don't really think that if you want to have people see every track layout, like great, but I think if anything, it would be better if we had 0 practice other than on the national layout and then just send us into the racing.
Yeah, I think
for the other layouts. Yeah, warm up. Yeah,
just a warm up.
session.
1 session, go.
That'd be cool. Because then, yeah, I mean, then everyone gets a little bit of that shootout experience on Saturday when we do the alternate. You know, and then if it's just 4 or 5 practice sessions on the regular layout on Thursday, then anyone that doesn't live there is going to get caught up to speed pretty well, you know, on the standard layout. And there's still a lot of different options you could do than what we've done. There's still that X30 shootout layout from 21 that I think was a pretty fan favorite from raceability, even though it was short at only 40, 35 seconds you guys ran there. I mean, the backwards layouts, I know Eric started them single file. I don't know how he'd feel about doing it any other way for heat racing, which is maybe why we won't see any backwards racing there, though.
But why don't you just start it on the back straight?
Could start there. I think.
I understand there's no timing beam, but I mean, it is what it is. I mean,
there's no timing beam in the infield either, to be fair. You can start wherever you want to for timing beam and finish. So the back straight could have been safe, you know, especially, I don't know if it's better or worse if you let them go going into the bowl like IndyCar and let them spread out to that left, or maybe you just wait till the left and then, you know, hopefully they find their way down. I think the worry was probably the runoff. If they would do the normal, now traditional way of starts where we're right at the end of a long straightaway into a corner, then we'd probably have some guys nosediving into the tire wall backed up by concrete earth wall at the original turn 1 if they went off there. But, you know, there's no good way to do starts other.
Nope. I think you actually hit mute. It's been a long week for all of us. I think you're back.
I think I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
We're good. There's one cable here. It's been a little finicky. Again, this laptop was soaked and should be dead after working outside, which is our own issue because I think looking back, I was talking to Jim O'Hara a little bit about it on Monday. I was like, I have enough cord and we call off the TV. I probably could have run us into a room and not been outside where we were calling the races with all of our equipment. And I put my own laptop on the line while I tried to cover all the other stuff. And this thing was junk. I'm amazed it worked and charges. Very, very lucky. But let's take a little break here. We'll do this commercial. We'll come back with a little more. I've got some viewer questions that are starting to populate in off our Instagram. And as always, from the comments, what you guys thought of this weekend, what this road stretch is like for the summer. It's obviously not over because we got testing for SCUSA this weekend for those, and the SCUSA Summer Nats coming up. So there's more to talk about for sure. But we'll go ahead and take our first little break and come back after.
Looking for the perfect vacation spot and a family fun weekend where a race breaks out? Look no further than Karting the Coast. Our 10 race schedule is already well underway, with stops at NOLA Motorsports Park in New Orleans and Finish Line Performance Karting in Biloxi, Mississippi, where our podium ceremonies are on the beach. We know how to have a good time and put on a good race, and all that we're missing is you. To find out more, visit kartingthecoast.info.
Kart Store USA is a kart parts supplier that racers and retailers can count on when they need reliable advice and service. We focus on servicing all racers with honesty and pride while maintaining customer satisfaction. We carry a full stock of Kart Republic and Tony Kart chassis, as well as IAME and Vortex Rock engines. We've also got a host of other parts available and in stock, such as products from Rev Performance Materials, Jecco Racing Seats, and more. We have a 100% satisfaction guarantee. And on top of that, if your order exceeds $200, shipping is on us. Check out all we have to offer today by visiting us online at kartstore-usa.com.
Oh, my bad. Didn't mean to put it right on you, Braden, coming after the break. So, granted, while the Heat beat everybody down, like we said, this is still one of the coolest events. It's just, I think, every year it's fine tuning, right? Coming out of it with the two main events, Chris, did you get to watch both the K and the X30 finals?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So what? Obviously, big takeaway with Dalton. Were you in that same boat that I was? That was a little bit worried he was going to burn his stuff up right when he went to the lead.
Not necessarily burn it up, but I just, I think generally speaking, if you're racing against, a Garrison, a Norberg, a Turney, they're probably on lower pressure than you. And Turney on the long run this year has been pretty unbeatable. Whether or not he's been the fastest or not, it just seems like he's been able to keep that pace for a longer period than a lot of guys. I thought he would have gotten to him quicker. And obviously that first pass was, that dive bomb into the hairpin was pretty epic. And for him to make it as clean as he did, I thought when I saw him go for it, I'm like, oh, this is ending horribly. And big props to Dalton too for just opening up enough for that contact not to be kind of race ruining. That shows his his experience and skill there as well. I don't know if I thought he was going to burn it up. I did not think his pace was going to last though as much as it did. That was really impressive and really cool to see.
Braden, what'd you take on from your end? I mean, granted, you're out there, so what was your 25 lap final like?
I mean, I thought it would feel like a lot longer than it felt like. But unfortunately, I started 16th, and actually I felt like I had pretty good pace, but struggled with some carburation issues, and for some reason I kept getting an air leak in my carb. We'd found it earlier in the weekend, fixed it, and then it kind of developed again, and then I fixed it before the race, and I went out and it was like, wow, the pace is right back, and I started lasering through the field and actually did just as fast as just as quick as anyone on one lap in the beginning. And then I think I started to have the same issue again, but I mean, I didn't really feel like it felt that long to me. I think I could have gone another 10 laps probably. I think it still didn't feel like a race car race distance at all. It still felt like a karting race distance. The only thing that I felt like was a little bit not the best was we didn't really have a whole lot of practice on that layout, and I never really had a chance to play with tire pressures at all throughout the practices on the national layout. So when we got to the final, in hindsight, I wish I would have gone a little bit lower. I know sort of what the front running guys were at, and I was a touch higher than that. I wasn't super far off, but talking about just kind of circling back to earlier on the format and the different layouts. I wish we would have had more practice on the national layout. I feel like when you have so much running on the other formats or the other layouts, it takes away from sort of like the weekend progression on the national layout. Like a lot of running at a big national race is dealing with the additional rubber that's laid down, the additional race distance and keeping your cart and keeping your driving on top of the track. And I think it made it a little bit more tough. I think it lent itself a little bit more towards the people that have run at GoPro a lot. But race distance wise, it still felt a little bit short to me. I don't know. I think another 5 laps for me would have been better.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like the 25 was pretty, I mean, that's pretty long, and that was kind of one of the big things from that event from the get-go that, I know Eric wanted to make that event longer than where we normally go. And I think, it's now PKS is pretty long there. Normally it's around 20 or 22. So we weren't a ton longer. But I thought that was long enough that you got to see guys fall off. I mean, by midway through, poor Austin Garrison was just hanging on, he dropped like a rock. There were guys going forward. Maybe if you go a little bit longer, you have a little more dynamic at play, but
I don't think so.
I don't think you have a lot in the way this race played out. Maybe if it was going back to like what you were saying earlier, Chris, that we didn't have as strong of an X30 field as normal, I I think that's the only way you mitigate how close these guys are this year. But because we only really had a handful of players on the weekend, you know, we didn't need it. In the same way, like, you know, I had talked with a few dads about like the mini and the micro racing. You know, they don't necessarily need to go any bit longer than what they are. If anything, they could be 5 laps shorter than what they are, because a lot of that race is kind of waiting, you know, to the final few laps, because there's only a handful of kids that can run up front. But when you had more, you know, in the field, like at USPKS a few weeks ago, that could have probably used another 5 laps. This one, maybe it would have been better for you to go forward. Maybe Garrison, you know, he might have faded a bit further back, but I don't think it would have changed a ton on how it played out, you know?
Yeah, but I think a lot of that is just down to the track. I mean, GoPro is just it lends itself to a fast 1-lap driver that qualifies up front and runs up front the entire weekend. There is not, I mean, you know, when we, you know, in the past, when we've talked about like the longest race distances have we done, that 25 lap distance at Newcastle, but a 25 lap distance at Newcastle is a minute 4 lap times 25 versus 48 seconds times 25, plus the track layout. Just, if you're at the front, you're going to be at the front the whole race. I mean, it is the way it is. Maybe somebody, but like realistically, if your stuff's going to last 25 laps at Mooresville, it's going to show from lap 5 on, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to fall off immediately and you're going to be terrible the whole race. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of that is just in the track nature of itself and how much aero wash, because I think it's worse to be in second. Even if you have the toe, it's worse to be in second because your tire wear is way worse in somebody's wake than it is in clean air.
Yeah.
I think I've done more and more races where they're time plus 1 or 2 laps. And I prefer the timed races, especially if you have like a digital board that kind of shows the time counting down. We did, I was over in Europe and we did 2 races over there, and both races were time plus, a lap or 2. And I really liked doing that. I feel like it's more consistent to track lengths, like kind of like Braden saying, you know, I know a lot of the FIA stuff is done based on a distance. So the laps change, you know, based on the distance of the track, you know, which, okay, is a little bit more complicated to work off of than just a basic, like, hey, we do 20-minute finals or 15-minute finals plus a lap or 2. I tend to like that a little bit more. It just makes it more consistent.
I agree.
Yeah. It also makes it a lot easier when it rains. That's for sure. You know, then we know we're running the same distance. It's easier for the series to stay on schedule, which
we're not cutting laps.
Yeah, we're not cutting laps.
Oh, I hate it.
In any way. I mean, then it is what it is. I mean, they're cutting laps to do exactly the same thing that a time would do. They're trying to hit a marker that they think is going to be right, but the track is never the exact same within 5 seconds, more or less, when it's a rain track. So, you know, we could go seconds quicker and it would be a shorter race, could go seconds longer. We fall behind schedule. That's tough. That, I think, was another, you know, as long as the weekend felt, for the most part, it was pretty damn near on time. It helps that, you know, even with the alternate layouts, we really only had, I think, 1 red flag, and it was off of a start in, I think, junior. Forrest Adams was the kid. He was checked out okay, tore up the go-kart. So that's always the big risk with the alternate layouts, is doing something you haven't done before and you don't know how it's going to race and where they're going to wreck and is it going to be in a safe zone that's covered off. But altogether, the weekend at least did stay on time. That was cool. And I think to pull as many entries as it did in the way that it's run, which is to try and not, you know, drown out PKS, try not drown out SCUSA, try not even drown out Stars, because there's so many IAME classes there that, you know, it's always been like, we'll wait until right to the last second to let people know that this event happens, and to pull 186 was still pretty cool, because that's such a tricky spot to be in from a promoter when you're the guy also sponsoring other series that you don't want to, you know, ruin them as well. And there was just no good way around it this year. And next year, it still is a little iffy. This is the one event that doesn't have its date for next year. All the series have been fighting for the summer to get, you know, the kids to be able to be out of school and run it. But I think if anything we learned from this summer, this weekend doesn't feel as long or as everyone as burnt out as it did. If we weren't coming off of like weekend to weekend to weekend to weekend to weekend through
Right.
through June.
And back to it right away.
Yeah, and back to it. Like, if this had it, that was the other thing that was nice about that opening year. Summer Nats in 2021 was in August, and it was 2 weeks away. I think the last PKS race was maybe a Road America weekend. I think it was the second week of July, and this ended up being 2.5, almost 3 weeks away. So the gapping was better, and even with these long days, everyone was still pumped up. But part of why I feel like we're as bit down as we are is the whole year is just beating everybody up, and it's also beating up the races that aren't happening. Over the weekend, the rock race up in New York got canceled, the Rock Festival, which has unfortunately been a race that has not really gotten off the ground. The only festival they've had is Sonoma. One of the questions I had that came in that gets us a little bit off topic was from a guy asking if rock can survive in the US, which unfortunately for them, the optics weren't great with the grid announcement coming out for Rock Vegas on pre-entering. Chris, you're already shaking your head. I know you have a lot of thoughts about that.
We talk about that a lot. Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that we do here is so Mickey Mouse, and I think every series is guilty of it to some part. And that's about as Mickey Mouse as you can get, and it's just like, you're just like, yeah, I almost think it turns more people away than it brings people in. I just don't understand what the thought process is behind that. But I actually talked to someone that I had a conversation with someone today that is very big in the industry, and they thought the same thing. They were wondering if rock would survive. I think we need that other series. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be rock, but I mean, they do deliver a very good product. I mean, I don't think anyone argues that when they go to a rock race. I mean, it is one of the most well-run organizations. The tech's good. Everyone's nice and friendly. Ursula and the whole crew run a great program. But there's just these little things that just get you, every little bit, there's just something always that's just like, oh, what are we doing here?
Yeah, there's been the thorn in the side, right? Vegas last year, the barriers got blown around, cut out a lot of practice day on Wednesday. I think the opening winter tour this year didn't really have a lot out of it, just was lighter on entries because people had bad experiences at St. Petersburg because of the surface being rough. And it is a rough surface, but I'll give them a lot of credit. They listened to a lot of criticism, and they made that racetrack a whole lot racier in 23 than what it was in 22.
Yeah, it was much better.
In 2020. Then, of course, unfortunately, the tire deal happens in PK in February, and that just, that was somewhat out of their hands. You can always handle things maybe a little better comms-wise looking back, but it's just been rough for them of one little thing when they're trying to do the right thing. I think, though, the biggest lesson that if they're listening, and to be honest, the scheduling part that they're struggling with of why they can't seem to see growth, I don't think it comes from anyone on the American staff. The issue is they don't have the ability to kind of do, I think, what they want and go down to the grassroots level like what J3 is doing with Rotax. So what Justin and John and Jim are doing, that is the exact model that you have to be right now. In the same way that Stars has gone after a different market and grown themselves to the point that now the national market, is looking at it. And that is going to places where, the IAME guys aren't superior. And Rotax has done an amazing job at that with a lot of club support at tracks that have been neglected in the Northeast. A lot of club support at tracks have been neglected in the Southwest. Even different areas around the country. They find it where like, hey, this club needs some help, and they're able to give them some motors. And Rock, on the other hand, they haven't been able to do that for one reason or another. And I don't think it's because of I think the world of, the people from working with them on the American side, I don't think it's a neglect thing, but for one reason or another, they're just not able to, get the powers that be, let them do what they want to do over here and go all the way to the bottom up, because you can have a national race in the middle of nowhere right now with IAME engines, and it's going to draw people because there's people around that area probably that have IAME engines. But you can't just put a rock race in the middle of anywhere, just like the RTX guys down in that are the southern half Rotax importers that want to live in Miami. and are trying to do their trophy deal. The only reason that even worked this year was because it was 2 weeks where it was 2 weeks back to back that all the international people could fly to Florida for 2 weeks and race, because you've got a state with an IAME track and a state with either an IAME or a rock track in Orlando and a pretty IAME, affiliated track in Anderson. So as terms of rock surviving, that's what they need to do. Keep the Vegas stuff around. If you can keep Winter Tour going, but you've got no other club pockets. There's not a single club, I think, that I know of besides Sonoma that runs the engine.
Yeah, and I actually did a Sonoma club race earlier this year, and it was great. I mean, really good. They do a really good job up there. But again, I think that's more on that group doing a really good job for that specific club. It's, not saying that Rock Cup or the Rock USA guys aren't doing a good job, because they are. But I think the other little pockets, they have so little control of some of these clubs that if they could influence a little bit more, it might help a little bit more. I think the biggest thing maybe is, again, no fault to Rock Cup USA guys, but the parity of the engines probably is the biggest downfall of the product. Is, the mini, micro, VLR, even the GPs, the parity between engines is probably the biggest of the main three kind of engines. And that's probably, the biggest issue. And it's probably the biggest issue to fix as well. The tire thing, look, it happened to MG, it happened to Bridgestone, it's happened to Vega, it's happened to everyone. It's growing pains with the new way a lot of these people are having to make tires. That just was inevitable to happen at some point. Again, nothing kind of really in their control. It's the parity of the engine. I think that's probably the only thing that they can't do anything about. And it's difficult because they do run such a really good show there.
Yeah. Speaking of
I don't
schedules,
I don't know if you could say you
ahead.
can't do anything about that.
Well, you know what I mean. Like them as Rock Cup USA.
They were more even than IAME, or actually they were more even than X30 the past 4 years until this year. So
you think?
Well, the last 4 years, X30 was the least fair class that there's ever been, in my opinion.
Well, yeah.
Come on.
I don't agree, but
I don't know.
You're speaking about something different, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess.
I don't, the X30 stuff that we had.
Whether it's the engines themselves or what's being done to them.
Braden, you sound scarred for life right now.
He was. I mean, to be fair, he did race in that era that he's talking about. I barely did, and
I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, so that's just hard to win in. That's what was so cool about this weekend too. I mean, there was so many different people that could have got going, and if we would have had a few more guys in X30 there, it sucked to not have the PSL guys here. Just such a packed schedule. I mean, they've been getting, unfortunately, their butts kicked up and down the curb in KZ, and I think between the Canadian season taken up, part of their deal, but also wanting to go back to the shop and work on engines to try and have a fighting chance at Newcastle is part of the reason we didn't see them here. So, we look to next year, and everyone I think is kind of puckering up around the industry at it. And it's been something we've talked about a little bit. I think everyone in the paddock's kind of looking at it. When you have a burnout stretch like this, you go around on Sunday night and you talk to anyone and they're like, yeah, I'm not doing this many races next year. I didn't even know if I was going to come here. I didn't know if I was going to come there. And that's not at any specific event either. But it's at this point that, like, I was talking with one team, and they're running at the big races because there's a brand that wants they want branding up there between the guys that are backing them for the sponsored guys to run, but they don't have time because they're running these guys at so many big races to go back and set up their feeder system by being at club races all the time and fill customer drivers into the tent that could, eventually maybe get onto a deal to lead the brand forward. So we've got so much going on that you could have if a manufacturer would back it, which is the biggest thing for the sport that we would love to have, but we don't, is have a national team and then a proper, another guy, a whole other business that's running the club and the feeder, and he just feeds into their tent, which is kind of how PSL and Burrell does it. And I think they do it out of all the manufacturers, some of the best, because Burrell gives a budget to PSL that can help them run guys. And then PSL also extends that love down to, like, I know from talking to the Atlanta Motorsports Park guys, they're able to send one club guy to go run with PSL for free for a weekend once a year. I think that's super cool. But that's the only way this stuff survives with so much racing next year, because it's drowning out, everyone. I mean, you walk away from this weekend, the guys that made the most money, obviously, promoter worked out okay since since Eric is owning the track and the tires and the engines. Otherwise, if it was an independent promoter under 200 entries giving away that kind of cash, they're not doing that good. And then the drivers that got the cash, like Turney or Dalton, they came away okay. The day rate guys came away okay. They're loving how much racing there's going on this year, all the day rate coaches and mechanics and everything. But the teams are, I feel like the teams are just getting obliterated a little bit with all this stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, Seth and I, we talk about it every once in a while. And, it's difficult for him because, he's a West Coast based team that has a very strong local and regional contingent, right? And he is one of those teams where, he's not a factory backed team, kind of like, PSL or, Chad Donkin in a way, a couple other teams. So he's got 2 trailers, he's got a team manager that goes to all the national races. Sometimes Seth flies in a day later, or, has to be at a club race, or vice versa. And, Blake's pretty much been at every major race this year. And it's definitely difficult, and it's definitely hard. But I think once you start to get that structure in order, and I know because we've gotten that structure, and Seth has got that structure now with Zach, really leading the charge there. And once you get that structure, it actually works out pretty well, and you can manage it. It's just getting that structure in place that maybe is difficult or overwhelming if you've never done it before. I can see, Doty and Jarsakrak kind of be in that position very soon, where they're going to have to make a decision, how much effort do we put in the national side when we got this massive club, or Perry, same thing, how do we kind of structure this? And I think they'll figure it out, but I do think we'll get to a point here in the next year or two where you'll see more of that, and it'll actually be good for the sport, because you will have that feeder system, and it will stay within the team. It's not people not jumping around. We'll have these bigger teams with more experience at the lower level still, to help educate people and bring people in the right way and not in the wrong way. So I think it could help us, actually.
Braden, what do you guys think? You guys I feel like, are exactly in the position Chris is describing with the new shop at Whiteland for MPG. You've got, the last few races you guys have been, if it's not been an IndyCar weekend, we still haven't seen Billy at the track, because he's been helping run the local shop guys at the club at Whiteland Raceway Park. So, I know the long weeks are tough when you're on the road. I mean, you guys didn't have the truck really barely come home you guys went straight from Pittsburgh to North Carolina, just like we did, right?
Yep. Yeah, and we're kind of in the same situation where, I know MPG is sort of a newer team, but we've got a whole operation that we're building at Whiteland between our summer camps. We have a summer camp coming up this coming week. We have a whole bunch of national stuff. We have stars. Between Root, we got all this sort of things that we need to sort of prioritize where we want to be and what we want to do, because, like for us, we're trying to develop drivers, right? So like keeping some of our guys home and trying to really work on driver development when they're not necessarily ready to go up to the national stuff yet is a big thing. And it spreads us thin when we have to almost do both all the time. We got races going on at Whiteland all the time, and it's pretty tough from that end. Trying to sort of almost, you kind of have to have 2 completely separate entities, completely separate race team and completely separate sort of team at the club, but we want to have some continuity there. So we end up mixing the 2 and having both of our sort of operations sort of mix and match on the weekends. But it is hard because, for us to really be able to make it into a legitimate business and actually be able to make money, we need to have, a race shop. We need to have all these things that are able to actually make money, when in reality, going to the national events that's not really where we're making enough money to pay ourselves. So on that end, it's tricky, but I mean, it's just karting is a difficult industry, honestly. It's an industry where obviously people are getting into it and it's not cheap by any means, but like Chris, you know that it's way different in race cars. You know, what it costs is what it costs. And in karting, at the end of the day, a lot of teams just end up subsidizing it anyways because everyone likes to give deals and everyone wants a good driver. So you subsidize for the good drivers, but you go to cars, I mean, that's when you sort of realize it's like, oh, shoot, like this stuff is expensive and they're not just going to give it to me for free because I've got to have a staff of 12 people working full time for the year just for me and my 3 teammates to go racing, and the money's got to get paid there somehow. And it's just pretty difficult when you know, you I mean, kind of got off on a tangent there, but you know, we really want to start building up from the club level, and it's just hard to build from the ground up when we're sort of already at all the national stuff all the time, and I haven't been home at all, and now I'm going to end up, you know, I have one driver from MPG that's going to be at the warm-up weekend in the SKUSA Pro Tour, so I'm just going to handle it myself. But you know, we're all over the place, and we're being very spread thin, and we still are trying to develop our Whiteland operation and all this other things, and it's just really, really difficult. Feels like everything's just getting pushed back and delayed because we're so slam packed. And it's this season schedule has definitely been one of the most filled up, I think, partially because USPKS adding a couple more, or I think it's just one extra weekend. And then IAME Grands, obviously it's relatively new, but sort of nothing is getting dialed back throughout the years. Everything is just there's just bigger schedules. Everyone is sort of trying to fill in the gaps because you have so many series trying to you know, position themselves well. And at the end of the day, it's just kind of burning people out. And at the end of the day, it's not good for anyone, right? Because the people at the end of the day that are getting hurt the most by it are the customers who are having to pay for everything, and they're having to go against people that are doing the warm-up weekends at every event, and it's just craziness.
I would say too, one of the things that's hard in the karting industry, kind of like Braden was talking about, is to expand the way we want to expand, and we want to get these teams to expand. It's hard to find the right people that have the right experience, but be able to pay them enough worth for what they're really worth in our industry. You know, a great example, and Braden would know this, you know, so I talk a lot with some of my clients about when we're talking about moving into car racing and kind of expectations about pricing on not just cars, but if we're going to get a coach, or I'm going to continue with you as a coach in car racing. And one of the things where a lot of drivers that have experience in cars and car coaches, and they start with drivers in karting, rarely move up into car racing with that coach because they're in shock of the price difference of just coaching, right? You're essentially, it's the same service. It's actually easier in car racing. There's less sessions, you're dealing with more experienced drivers. There's more experienced staff that they're working with that's giving them knowledge and information. And you're essentially, you know, depending on the coach, but you're essentially asking for double the amount of money for less work, right? And it's a sticker shock, right? But that's what your time is worth. And I think in a karting industry, where we do have a difficulty with people that this is their livelihood, and you're essentially asking them to work as if it's a hobby for them. And that's where it's really difficult for us to grow. Is in car racing, people know this is a profession. Doesn't matter what you do in car racing, it's your profession. I think in the karting industry, a lot of parents feel like this is just a hobby for you. You know, it's not your profession, it's not what you do. You got something at home, right? Day to day. Like, what else do you do? And you're like, no, this is what this is my career. This is how I feed my family. This is how I live, where I live, whether or not it's in California, right? Or having to move because you're looking for someplace a little bit cheaper. That's that difficulty of really growing, because I mean, most people aren't getting paid what they're worth, in all honesty, even as team owners. You know, there's a few that make a really, really good living, but there's a lot of really good team owners out there that are just scraping by, and they run really good on the outside. They run really good businesses, but they're scraping by.
Yeah. I mean, the demand is there, right? Like the demand is that's the one thing that's different from a few years ago. If you were to say that a few years ago, people would not only be willing to spend as much money racing as they are now, but even just race as much as they are now and be as dedicated in terms of the number. I think that number of people is higher because sometimes we look at it, there's different, you can look at it in a positive or negative light, right? That the fact that it's the same traveling group of people filling these 200, 300 entry races up. But like it or not, the reason that the schedule keeps expanding is nobody's dying. Every single series is either plateauing healthily at over 200 in terms of the major ones. I mean, Rock is on an unfortunate little bit of a downturn in Winter Tour, which again is kind of unrelated to, I think, the demand, because that was always a little bit of a different crowd anyway. But the fact that Stars is still healthy, SCUSA is still healthy, no matter what people say, PKS is healthier than it's ever been, and we're going to all of them, right? So that's where, like, your point about the next 1 to 2 years being really interesting if the teams can scale, if we can find a way to meet this new level of demand at the club level, because there's more and more tracks getting built that have motivated owners to get in. Racing in general in the U.S. feels like it's at a good place. How it can all fit together, I think, is something that I just keep trying to wrap my head around. And there's no right, perfect answer. And the answer still, I don't think, to me at least, is clear enough yet. It's going to be different for everyone in every different position, even for us. I mean, we have more races that want us to go stream to. I don't know how we're going to get to them next year.
I mean, I think it helps too. Like, I mean, I do think we do a good job here when we're talking and people are listening, when we have individuals that have kind of gone to that next echelon in the sport or worked in that next echelon of the sport, which is car racing, because there is a lot of, you could call it false information that's always spewed around the karting paddock about, oh, car racing's so much cheaper. I could be in a race car right now for $100,000 and I spend $150 in go-kart racing. And it's not comparable. I mean, you're racing in a Spec Miata series against a bunch of old guys and a couple like okay go-kart drivers that got into Spec Miata. The level is not there. You're actually hurting yourself in your career path, in all honesty, if you really want to make it to the highest echelon of motorsports. But that education isn't there. So you have these parents that are listening to people that haven't made it, haven't worked, or haven't gone up to that top echelon, and they're being kind of mistold what the real cost of the sport and the racing. And I think if they understood really what it took to get to the point where their ultimate goal is, they would actually go, oh, karting, I mean, it's expensive, yes, but it's not that crazy. It really isn't, especially for the competition you're getting and the knowledge that you can get. There's not really much like it, and, I think that's kind of where we can kind of help educate the people that are new to the sport or have kids that want to move up through that sport. Because if we're going to be honest, all these national races, all this, it's all fueled by people that want to go to the next level. We hate talking about, but it's the truth. Let's just keep them in there a year or two longer, right? But also let's educate them so that our businesses can thrive and we can charge the amount we should be able to charge. We're not cutting deals all the time because we're afraid of losing these customers, and they can continue to grow in our sport.
It's a good point. We need parents just, they don't know. I think it's the saddest thing when you see a kid with talent get mismanaged. And to be honest, in some cases it's the parent won't listen, but in a lot of cases they just didn't know. I mean, it's so fun to have, the great relationship that we have with the Zillish family that come and, I've stayed at their house. Sometimes we've done some of our first events over in Mooresville. And, obviously Connor and Bradley, Connor's brother, was working a camera for us all weekend that not a lot of people know about. The guys work behind for me. And Connor was able to come and announce in the shootout when he wasn't announcing or wasn't coaching over the weekend. He talked to, Connor's dad, Jim. He's like, man, I wish I would have knew what I know now managing Connor, of doing what we needed to do that got Connor on the radar, that got Connor in a Chevrolet development deal when I had Bradley racing. But it took me all that money and all that time of going racing with Bradley, his older brother, by about 6 years. And by the time Bradley was in senior, he knew exactly what he needed to do in karting to develop Connor, to put him into Europe at the right classes at the right time, then to start doing cars at the right time when he was ready to jump over, and then in cars, which car racing series to go with and how to manage that. And that was something that you can't fault him. He's a smart guy. Anyone in the paddock that's got money, for the most part, they earned it. They're a smart person in some, in some discipline. But it's just such an intricate and so lack of public information sport that you just see all the time. These guys go up, one way or another. And I think I've thought that for a little bit, that if there was more value that people took away, whether it's going up to cars or more life skills that they feel like they come away from the racetrack, besides the obvious ones of learning how to win and lose, that you lose a lot more than you win, it'd be more of a value to, justify spending the money that you spend to run it, if that was more well known. And if part of that's educating exactly this is how you need to do it. And that was part of, what was the idea that Eric brought in last year with IMSA coming in. And unfortunately, those guys kind of, from what I understand, went cold. I'm really happy that Skip Barber's at least interested in continuing to start investing between us. They just did deal with Stars, and that's a start, but a lot of education we could do a better job, and that would give more value, and then it would make the demand continue to flourish enough where the teams could survive this blossoming out, schedule of everything.
I've always said this to the drivers that I work with, where they go to a new series or new team, or even they're within the team that they work with. You'd be surprised at how many people in our industry and our sport, if you just go up and ask the question, how willing they are to answer the question, right? But it's that being afraid to ask, like, they're going to think I'm stupid, or they're going to think I don't know anything or anything like that, right? But in reality, if you ask that question, right, they're going to be willing to give you that information. I just wonder if we could just do a little bit better job of just being like, hey, once a year, we're going to have a seminar at one of the biggest races. It's going to be at night. We'll provide food. It's free of charge. Anyone can come. We'll bring all the people that have this industry knowledge that are in our paddock, and maybe a couple special guests, right? So if we're in Indy and, it's an off week for IndyCar, I'm sure we could get a Will Power, a Connor Daly, a Joseph Newgarden, people that are still relevant and participate in our sport. I guarantee they'd give an hour or two of their free time out to help educate the people. But we don't do anything like that, right? And just have it more of like a seminar, like not even like we're speaking to people, like we answer their questions. What questions do you have? And really have it more of a conversation. But I think that something like that could really help and just help the educational purpose of our sport.
I like it. I think it's a good note to give everyone a moment to think about. We're going to take one more commercial break and wrap up with a few more of the questions that have come in. So we'll take this break, and we'll be right back after this, everybody.
KC Happy Hour is proudly presented by the Rock Sonoma Karting Championship, presented by Cameron Race Promotions, the most competitive Northern California karting series. Featuring a 2-day format with practice on Saturday and racing on Sunday, multiple track configurations, and a massive prize structure including tickets to Rock Vegas, race car test opportunities, and race rewards. Rock Sonoma is the training ground of multiple national karting champions each year and race car champions as well. Featuring a full Rock Cup USA class structure with each race weekend streamed live via YouTube, it's a series you cannot miss. For more info, check us out online at zanzarukarting.com.
So we had to lose Braden. He's sick, to be fair, so we'll give him a bit of the doubt. Let's switch over to the kids' classes a little bit. Micro's good. Mini's good. K Junior's looking really good. With the X30 Junior stuff kind of hit or miss throughout the year, this weekend was good because there was purse money for it. but through the year it's been dwindling. David Cole with EKN had kind of an idea. I think we've talked a little bit of a few ideas. You look at that class, you got your driver Charlie running that class. If you're Czar, what do we do that gets involved in terms of promoting it? Or I think we may have been on here a few months ago and came up with an idea of maybe not, just unrestricting the K and putting that to junior. Or maybe that was off air.
It was off air, but I'm not sure it 100% solves everything. I still think the end all be all is that is my personal opinion, obviously, but I think spec racing is the biggest issue. I think we can open things up a little bit to even the playing field when there are engines that are just that little bit better. And honestly, when you're working at the highest level where you're looking for every 100th and every 100th counts to an nth degree, when you have drivers that are so equal in their talent level, you start kind of spending a lot more money on stuff you shouldn't be spending money on, right? You hear stories of people buying 10, 20, 30 engines. So they have 30 pipes to go through, 30 carburetors to go through, 30 cylinders to go through, piecing 1 or 2 bullets together. I've talked to a couple engine builders where they're like, that's not even the problem. The problem is just keeping the stuff consistent from rebuild to rebuild and being fast from rebuild to rebuild. And, have an engine that's really fast and then they rebuild it and then it's all of a sudden not fast. And then they have to work on it some more when really, you're working on it, but you're not really working on the sense of what I'm used to working on it means, right? Which is, fine tuning the ports or changing the cylinder and the head and, maybe cutting the piston a little bit different. Not saying we need a fully open category, but I think it would help because when you have that engine that is a 10th off, you can get it there. When it doesn't have bottom, you can work on it to get it there. I'm sure I'll get a lot of, disagreement on that, but I think that's kind of where we can improve it. I kind of joked with the KA, non-restricted KA, but I would hate to see us go kind of backwards to a air-cooled, 100cc engine as our premier junior category engine. I think we do need to try to stay close to the international stuff. I don't think we need to copy it at all. But, look, an OKJ, not an OKJN, an OKJ is cheaper to run and more reliable than an X30 junior engine. That's a problem, right? You have the top level junior racing in the world that's as fast as an X30 senior, if not faster. And that's more reliable and cheaper to run than our engine. It's pretty much at the highest level that we run KA. It's cheaper to run than a KA as well. And that's a fully open category.
Yeah.
So that's the issue we're kind of going up against. We don't have that category here, but I can tell you for fact that you can go race in Europe in a lot of categories for the same price or cheaper than here. And a lot of it is because of the rules that we have versus what they have. There are obviously teams like Ricky Flynn, some of the other teams that are outrageously expensive, but you can go do some really big events for the same price or less with better competition.
Yeah, but would it when we brought the OKN over, those are going with markup through the dealers to everything stupid high.
Yeah, but that's also not a proven category that even in Italy has like 10 drivers.
Yeah.
And it's not proven. Not saying that we need okay here. I'm not saying that we do. I'm just saying that like having an open category doesn't necessarily raise the cost of the racing, right? Because I know the price that some of these people are paying for certain engines, and it's astronomical, but people are doing it. And that wouldn't, if we had some ability to work on the engines, that probably wouldn't be a thing anymore.
Yeah.
So, I've talked to some of the series guys, one of them I'm pretty close with. And I said, the easiest way to fix this one issue you think you have is by opening it up, because now they're not going to go do that. Now certain people don't have a monopoly on something that people think they're going to have a performance advantage with, right? They're engine builders that are very talented, that have tons of experience, will be able to do what they're good at.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I stand.
Fair. We have a couple of questions that came in. This one, I mean, so this was from Rod Glenard saying, how can a mechanic from Texas charge as much as a mechanic from California or vice versa? Cost of living parity just isn't the same. At some point, cost of living comes into play, which is all fair if they're working in that region. But I don't know how you answer that question exactly when they're, flying from wherever to go work at a national race. I think that's probably just on them.
Yeah, I mean, there is a kind of a rate that is, I would say normalized in our industry for each kind of job, right? Mechanic, tuner / mechanic, which is different, right? You have mechanics that are a little bit newer, maybe a little bit less experienced, don't have as much technical knowledge of the sport, that, are pretty much told what to do, right? Their job is to keep everything clean, make sure everything's tight, make the changes on time, not miss sessions, etc. Then there are tuner mechanics that may be hired by the client or even by the team. So the team owner has a little bit less, kind of spreads his responsibility out a little bit more. That has kind of like a mechanic, like an engineer on a race team, that has more knowledge. So they're charged a little bit more, and then you have team managers, coaches, there are guys out there that I would say that are kind of fit all 3 to 4 categories, right? And they're charging the most in the industry, that are day rate guys that aren't owning teams, I would say. It's a personal conversation you have to have with whoever you're working for and working with. In Texas, you're probably good. You're probably going to get paid the same amount as the California guy. It's the California guy that needs to have the conversation. That's like, hey, I should be making the same amount of money as the Texas guy. I need to make a little bit more here.
Yeah. I mean, we see that with engines, right? You don't need 206 out there, but you need it in Texas. You need it in Georgia, because the cost of living for the customer, it's just different in terms of the disposable income dollar, even if the percent's the same. Yep. A couple people actually liked your idea of maybe, for now, if we just do webinars of stuff. So Chris, I think we should absolutely do more of that stuff. And I don't know, man, I'm drawing a bit of a blank to kind of end this off, because I always like ending off on something pretty strong. I feel like we've been going good. Fortunately, we lost Braden to the flu. He's dying in bed.
I got one. In all honesty, we didn't get to talk much about Dalton. We don't need to go in depth about it. I think people lived it. But I mean, it's one of the cool stories, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it is a very David versus Goliath. Yes, does he have a little bit of help on the technical side from, powers that be, and he can go up and ask certain questions when he needs to and wants to. Yes, 100%. But dude, the kid wheeled it. You couldn't. We sponsor him and help him out on our end a little bit. So I'm a little biased, but he is one of the nicest, hardworking kids that you'll meet in our industry. Humble, but also confident in his own abilities. And yeah, I mean, to take it to arguably the best driver in the world at the moment, right? I would say. I mean, he's definitely top 3 best drivers in the world in single speeds at the moment, based on what he's won this year and the amount of races he's won. To put it to it, doesn't matter if it's your home track or not. Super impressive. And I talked to him yesterday. He said he's going to be back on track. He isn't no win, but he's going to be back on track sooner than he thought. And hopefully with a little bit more support, and I hope to see him back at the front.
Yeah, that was cool. I mean, as long of a road stretch it's felt that got, beaten up at the end on the final weekend here, and still in the middle of it, but with that weekend, with the heat, with the rain, with everything, I think a lot of people will burn out, and then the people that stuck around and watched that and saw that story to end it off, that, still I think sent everyone in a much better mood on Sunday, and that happens in general at any race. Whenever we have a good final race of the day, doesn't matter what class it is, if it's a good last race, when we come off track, people are happy. And that was so cool. Yeah, I mean, I talked about it on the broadcast. Dalton started working for us, Rock Vegas 21, because I got to know him a little bit after he debuted there. I kind of knew of him and his brother here and there at the club stuff, but that was the first weekend we really talked a bit. And, you know, I mean, even that weekend got him to race again, which they thought that was going to be it. And he came and did social media for us at the Rock Vegas 21 before we did live stream. He worked a ton of live streams. And, you know, the cool part about doing that from a driver is at least when he was announcing, when he was working a camera, he was watching all these guys. He watched Joe Turney take it to Norberg and Morgado and Homestead and watch that crazy battle with Bonilla. And he was the camera up at the top of the screen, and a bunch of other races over the years. So obviously I'm biased too. And I was biased on that broadcast, about as biased as I'll let myself get. And it was hard not to. My heart was in my throat for probably lap 10 on, just knowing that it would mean so much if he'd win it, and honestly thinking that as good as Joe is, he'd get to him. And I think to your point, you know, Joe's not only one of the best, if not the best guy in the country, in the world right now, he's also the best guy on the best stuff in the world right now. What up, Nico?
What up?
future star right here.
Yeah, so that was so cool. And yeah, the woodwork, you know, everything comes out of the woodwork to come and help him. He's got support. I know Eric already did a ton, gave him a free go-kart extra. That go-kart he gave away, and the $1,000 tuner of the weekend to help the boys out more. That was, you know, last second as well, which was so cool to do that and to step up and help him. And so he's going to get to race a good bit more. He's not got, I think, a perfect idea direction of where he can go and where he should go. But when you win something like that in front of the right people, I think kind of help guide you, and he's got that. So that was absolutely one of the coolest stories. And I don't know, you know, who was my anonymous script writer from that one that I can't credit, but from the Kart Chaser episode of the weekend, that was that guy deserves a raise, whoever he is, for writing that kind of script.
Yeah,
because that
I
was
also
cool.
think, you know, we talk about the event, you know, the Grand Nationals and all that. In all honesty, like, that's what makes that event so cool, right? If that would have happened at Pro Tour or a USPKS race, it'd be like, ah, cool, man, he won. That's cool.
Yeah,
it's awesome. But I just think it being a single event, being Grand National kind of title, you know, same thing for Supernat, same thing for Rock Vegas. You know, it's that single event that you're just like, dude, that's rad. And that's what made it even cooler, I think.
Yeah. What a walk-off victory. Good way to end this show off, too. For those that are, like you said, big Dalton fans, he's going to get to race more. He'll be on it more. Don't know when, but, you know, I actually did a podcast with him on Monday that I got a clip around. I did it with him and his brother Roman. If anyone that watched the broadcast and saw shirtless Roman taking his $1,000 tuner of the weekend, I got to do a little bit of editing to help Roman. But that'll be cool. And he goes in depth a lot about, you know, how he was able to manage his tires, how he kind of managed the race, and the mental game, which I think one thing that kid is so good at is, like you said, he's confident in his abilities and he has some good raw, you know, seat of the pants natural feel, but he's also like really analytical. And when I look at all the drivers from the bird's eye view that we get to see and talking to everyone, I feel like very rarely do you have a driver that is the best of both. That's like stupidly fast from lap one on because their natural feel is insane, and also unbelievably analytical. You know, Joe Turney's one of those guys, right? That's stupidly fast, natural seat of the pants, raw talent, and extremely analytical, extremely good mental game. You have some kids that are too fast for their own good and they don't know what to do with it mentally. And you have other guys that, you know, can race a lot better and can out racecraft their pace, but they're not the guy that you peg going in on the weekend to be the fastest driver. And he was both this weekend.
Yeah.
And so, you know, best guy won. Cool story. Great way to end it off. So Chris, Summer Nats, is that the next gig for you? 2 weeks?
Yeah, I took this weekend off. Need a weekend with the family. Get some stuff done around the house. Get ready for another little. What?
That's crazy.
It's crazy. It is
Crazy. Weekend off.
And yeah, spend more time with this dude and my wife, and we'll be back at Newcastle.
All right. Well, with that, everyone, thanks as always for watching. Nico, can you sign us off? Can you say thanks for watching to everyone back home?
Thanks for watching.
Hey,
right.
what do you say on the YouTube channel? What should they do?
Thanks for watching, fans.
Okay. Like and subscribe.
Let's
See ya.
I like it. Good enough. Thanks, Chris. Thanks
Yeah.
everyone for watching. We will see you guys at the next one.